I now turn to our last speaker. Mr. Patz will be given the floor. Let me say that Mr. Patz is also, he and I have a common characteristic. He's also a political scientist like myself. So he is a lecturer in politics at the University of Potsdam, but he speaks here, I suppose, in his capacity, as a member of civil society organizations. I see the word activist here, but I'm not using it to designate you necessarily. Please have the floor.
I fully feel confident to be an activist for transparency or a lobbyist for transparency. I don't mind the names. What I do academically and privately is trying to advance access to documents and transparency on the EU level. My PhD thesis is on information flows in the context of EU policymaking. And already in that context, I need documents from the institutions, and already in that context, I come into contact with the questions raised here on a very practical matter, including the case law. I'll come back to that in a second, but I'm also advising Transparency International, the EU office in Brussels, on these questions, funds transparency, access to documents, and integrity questions of the EU institutions. So these are the two sides of my activity, and they are connected by being a blogger, which I do in both contexts, as a scientist or an academic. I think in English is more correct word, and as a transparency activist. Also in the blogosphere, the European blogosphere. I co-organize a platform of EU bloggers, now has 750 blogs, and the colleagues who are in this blogosphere also do requests for documents. They search for documents, they try to make use of what's publicly available, and probably my main statement would be, whenever I have to deal with Regulation 1049 as such, I already feel that my work is interrupted. Whenever I have to request documents, whenever I have to think about what the regulation would say, what I can request, what not, I realize as an activist and as an academic, I will lose 2-3 weeks of my work. So basically, in my point of view, one of the major achievements of the regulation and what has been doing around it is Articles 11 and 12 on the registers. Because as was pointed out already, there is a lot of information out there on the EU level, and I think many member states are lagging far behind on the amount, at least, what is put out on the EU level. The problem is coherence, connection of the data, and the possibility to find it. I think over the last 3 years I've become quite a search expert in these platforms, and even closer journalist contacts would ask me whether I could find some things in these, which shows that you need 3 years of EU experience, including knowledge of how the institutions function, to find the documents that are needed for journalists, for lawyers on a daily basis, which shows that the way that active transparency is provided has a long way to go. And so, in a sense, I, as a more practical person in these questions, I need official documents, A, for my research, but also B, when I deal with Transparency International, I want to know what the Council is thinking on the recast of the current regulation. And the process is not as transparent as it could be, for example. And there are 2 current court cases of other organizations, Client Earth and Access Info, in front of the court. One is on the legal advice of the legal service regarding which of the amendments proposed by the Parliament are outside the scope, and the Council has refused to give access to this data despite the Turco judgment, which has been mentioned earlier. And the second one, I think, is on the more working documents, trying to know what the deliberations were on the process. And so what this shows is, when we as transparency activists want to influence the institutions, which includes the member states and the Council, which includes the relevant Commission services, and we don't have access to this kind of information, our capacity as civil society is severely limited. De facto, going to court and wait for 2 years to get a document in a process that itself takes 1.5 years is kind of demanding to civil society. And in this case, or in this sense, for us, it's more important that proactive transparency is there, so that we don't have to ask for information, less than getting into the details of the confirmatory applications, which still are needed to make sure that transparency is guaranteed. So the current recast process is probably one good example of where the activism on transparency meets the problems of transparency very concretely. And I have no idea how the outcomes will be. I think some of the court cases will take quite a long time. The good thing is, or the bad thing is, that the recast of the regulation is ongoing for 3 years now. And to be very honest, I don't see it coming to an end very soon as a private interpretation, because already in the European Parliament there is no full agreement on everything that is in the amendments proposed between the political groups. And within the Council, different member states have quite different cultures of transparency, ranging from probably Sweden to other member states.
Further south.
And so I don't see a quick agreement coming within the institutions on the recast of the regulation, seeing that it's ongoing for 3 years now. And so I kind of what I do, besides pressuring the institutions on a more general level to make sure that the current regulation is updated, especially with the Lisbon process, Lisbon Treaty stipulations, would say that not only the 3 major institutions shall give access to documents, but all bodies that the EU creates. And I think this will in the future change a lot of the work of some of the minor bodies, which yet haven't realized that they are EU bodies. Which, when I would write today to them to ask for documents, they wouldn't realize that I have the right as a citizen to request these documents from them. And I think the Ombudsman will get 1 or 2 of these complaints in the near future from one or the other citizen, including maybe me. Depending on what I get.
That's what the Ombudsman is here for.
So still, I think one thing is more try to pressure also on change of culture internally on the one hand side, and what I do with colleagues in Transparency International, but also outside, who have the let's say technological skills to try to help to create better platforms to get documents out, to connect all the 20,000 registers now existing for different kind of documents in the Commission alone, so to say, but across all institutions. And the ideal point, for example, would be you have a certain legislative process, and you would be able, with a click, to get all documents from all institutions connect to that. And I know the institutions are kind of working on a reform of their document registers. The EURLEX, for those of you who deal with EU law, is in the process of reform, and I've done a request for documents to the Council to know where this process stands earlier this year, and it's on my blog. And again, it's true, I've requested documents. They were offered to me without much delay, so it was over Christmas, so the 13 working days, I think, and 1 day later they were on the public online register of the Council, so I can confirm that a request for documents that I do is for the better of everyone, and that's why I can only ask you, when you don't find something, just handle it in, even if you don't get the answer in all cases. You're doing a service to all citizens by asking a request for documents. So reforming these platforms, I think, is, from a very practical point of view, quite as important as trying to reform the regulation itself, and I'll try to push for that. So this kind of activism we do is both legal, regarding the regulation, regarding requests, but it's also practical, and I think it's important. One issue I want to point to, which still is on the legal side of the debate, is what will be very important also for lawyers probably among you in the next years, is this debate between transparency and protection of data, of personal data. I think this debate will be politically and legally ongoing at least for the next 3, 4, 5 years, because our societies with all the changes are ongoing struggles on how to measure that, but also institutionally. And I want to show why some of the present court rulings are quite problematic also for our work. Transparency International is an anti-corruption NGO, so corruption usually happens between people. So it's usually, even if it's a company with the commission, it means it's an official or some officials with some employees of a company. But if the public has no right to know with whom the commission meets, how can we see where there are relations which may or may not be problematic in the institutions? If, as in the recent cases C 92, 93, 09 of the court on access to beneficiaries data, if we don't know which persons receive large amounts of EU funds, how can we know that they misuse them for private gain? And I think there lies for me an important debate on what level of privacy should we grant to people, and the court has said in the C92, 93 ruling that transparency is an important principle, but there should be clear objectives defined by the institutions, or clear limits or clear criteria under which situations names have to be made public. And I think this is where we again will come back to making new laws on new parts of laws, defining the criteria from when names may be made public and when not. And this is, for me, the debate for the next years, and we will in one way or another be involved in that, defending it in front of the court, the council, or doing complaints, or trying to push everyone to move ahead. And so this debate, I think, is the most challenging, beside all the nitty-gritty that we have to deal with in this regard. And on this, I think I'll finish to have a debate here.